Hey, everybody. I'm Bob Bakert with Jazz Guitar Today. And we are here with Scott Henderson, who really needs no introduction whatsoever. 17 records to your projects as a leader. You played with everybody. You played, with Joe Zawinul. You played with Jean-Luc Ponty. You play. I mean, I'm looking at your stuff here. Carl Verheyen, who I love. Jeff Berlin. You play with everybody, and that's just the official stuff as a sideman on recordings. That's got nothing to do with anything. So you have an interesting thing, and I'm going to get into this a little bit. The purpose of our discussion today is to talk about the influence of rock on jazz and jazz on rock. And when I came up with this idea, I said there's nobody on the planet that has done more in terms of really skating both of those genres than Scott Henderson. And when I called you, what did you tell me? It was the funniest damn thing. You said, man, I've been thrown out of more jazz clubs for playing rock and rock clubs for playing jazz than anybody in the world.
That's probably true.
I said, yeah, perfect. You're the guy. You're exactly the guy that we want to talk to. You play a John Suhr guitar, which is Strat based.
Mm-hmm.
3 single coil pickups. You play with a definitive, rock and roll kind of, overdriven tone most of the time. Lots of effects pedals, all of the accoutrements of a rock player, let's say. But your harmony, your lines, and all of that stuff is really very, very jazz. You do play pentatonic stuff as well. I mean, you got all of it. I mean, you really do play rock and you play jazz and you put it all together all in the same track, and it's freaking awesome what you do. You're an amazing
thank you.
You're an amazing, you're an amazing player, and I really do have. I used to have all of your videos back when you used to make videos, and I actually copped a couple of licks from a few of them, which is really great. So let's talk about what I want to talk about, which is the magazine Jazz Guitar Today. One of the missions that we have is to try to expand everybody's thinking, and so we have, we want jazz players to draw from rock and rock players to, draw from jazz. And when I say rock, that could easily be country. It could be, pop, it could be R&B, it could be anything along those lines. But, people that don't traditionally play through the changes, as it were, I guess that'd be a good way to define it. So in your mind, what have you seen in terms of, the jazz guys you played with? How are they influenced by rock players? How have they been influenced by jazz? Well, what is your take on this great big topic?
Well, I mean, it's a very global topic, and it's
huge,
broad. It's huge. It's broad.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge.
Take one talk about one person, and how one person has dealt with that whole issue through their career, and another person could be completely different. So I can only speak from my perspective.
You're the first interview on the subject, and you can go anywhere you want to. You can go with one specific guy, or you can go wherever you want.
Well, it wasn't what I'm seeing is that, in the last, who knows how many years since Miles Davis started, since Bitches Brew, really,
right,
was kind of maybe the start of fusion, but I believe it went back to Led Zeppelin, because, here you have a band who puts music on their albums, but when they get on stage, they play those songs for 15 minutes and they open it up for jamming. And it's like, that's jazz. I mean, that's the essence of jazz, improvisation. And Led Zeppelin was doing that at their shows way back then.
Wow.
They weren't playing the songs like they were on the record. They were opening up and stretching and playing really long solos. And they didn't have the jazz vocabulary, but the vibe was jazz. Let's open it up. Let's jam, let's communicate with each other. That's jazz. And it's really not much different than what Miles was doing on Bitches Brew. Let's just have a jam session in the studio until the tape runs out, so kind of like both worlds are, based on improvisation, and I think some jazz players and I don't want to come off like that. I don't appreciate traditional music, because I appreciate traditional jazz, traditional rock. It's where I draw my influences from. So how can I not appreciate it? I don't think everybody has to go into mixing genres to be a great musician or an important musician. There are many great jazz musicians who stick to what they do. Like my partner, Bruce Foreman, that I'm on Guitar Wank with, he's about as traditional as it gets when it comes to jazz guitar. He's a traditional bebop player. He plays all the traditional standards. And I love him, man. He's great. And I like listening to him. And he's, you know, I don't have any problem that Bruce isn't influenced by Led Zeppelin, you know, but the thing is that he may be in his own way, you know, but it's not as evident as someone like me uses distortion guitar. But I'm just saying that I appreciate traditional jazz and traditional rock, even though that's not the way I chose to go.
Right.
And I can tell you why. If you're interested in knowing.
I am, absolutely. I got Scott Henderson on the line here, man. Go for it.
I grew up in a very segregated part of Florida. You know, it was all white boys in their Les Pauls playing the music of Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin, basically, you know, and some Hendrix and some Jeff Beck thrown in. But it was basically all white friends, all rock. And that's all I knew, right? And when I had gotten out of high school, I got a call from a friend of mine and said, this horn band needs a guitar player. And all I knew about music was what I had, you know, previously been playing, the 60s rock, you know, which was, of course, as we know now, I didn't know it back then, but that music had been influenced by Black musicians. I mean, they were influenced by Black musicians. Led Zeppelin would never be Led Zeppelin without Muddy Waters. And those musicians, which I had never heard of. So in my mind, I'm thinking these white boys invented rock and roll and blues, which I was completely clueless at the time. I didn't know where they got this music from. I learned later, but I learned the reason I guess I learned this is because I took this job with this horn band. They happened to be Black. So I was the only white kid in the band. And they were playing music, James Brown, all Motown stuff, Spinners, you know, Luther Vandross, everything from that to Tower of Power, James Brown, Kool and the Gang, right? No music by white musicians, right? So at first I was a complete fish out of water. I had no idea what I was doing. Luckily, one of the saxophone players could play really good rhythm guitar, and he basically taught me how to play rhythm guitar, because they used to say that white boy can't play anything but leads. All I could play was blues riffs. I had no idea how to be funky on the guitar, right? So I immersed myself in that music. As I grew to love that music, and I wasn't super attracted to it at first because it was so foreign to me, but as I learned to love that music, that's what changed me into being a person that can love different music equally. Like, there came a time where I loved James Brown just as much as Led Zeppelin. And so that's what changed me and made me the person that I am now, who's not traditional anymore. Because how can you be a little white boy playing Led Zeppelin and also have a huge fro? I had a big fro like this big. I was actually pretty proud because I had the biggest fro in the band, right? And playing James Brown in that music, right? So to go further and get into jazz or anything else, classical music, country music, whatever, I can actually sit here right now and say that I have absolutely no favorite kind of music. I'm probably one of the only people I know that can say that. If you said I had to get rid of music in my life or only play one thing, I wouldn't know what to choose. It wouldn't be jazz. It wouldn't be rock. It wouldn't be funk. It wouldn't be country. It wouldn't be classical. It wouldn't be anything, because I love it all equally. I don't have a favorite kind of music, not even fusion.
Yeah,
you know?
I can't think of anybody that would say that besides you.
I can't either.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there are some other guys like me out there, but I don't know who they are. But I can safely say I don't have a favorite style of music. I just don't. I love it all. Wow. If it's good. Yeah. I'm only judging on quality, not style.
No. I get it. Yeah, but if it's I'd rather listen to well done Lithuanian throat singing than poorly done fusion.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I listen to, I'm blown away every time I hear You know, Beyonce, when I heard her sing that tune, or Me, Myself, and I off that same record, I'm just blown away. I'm as blown away by that as I am by my favorite Led Zeppelin record, or my favorite Miles Davis record, or my favorite Coltrane record. Or it's all relevant. It's all to be celebrated. You know, so I actually kind of feel sorry for the people who can't enjoy different types of music, because I feel like they're missing out, because some people only listen to the kind of music that they play. So I don't just, I guess I consider myself more of a fusion player, because I do mixed styles, blues, rock, jazz. There's some classical influence, but it's not what I listen to all the time. I don't just sit around and listen to fusion all day. I listen to everything. I listen to straight ahead jazz. I listen to ZZ Top. I love Meshuggah. You know, they're just awesome to me. I just love those guys. I love Tool, you know, then all the old rock bands. I love the old blues guys, man. Like Albert King. I got to meet him one time. It was like one of the biggest pleasures of my life. I got to meet him. Well, I mean, it's just like, I just went up to him at North Sea Jazz Festival, and he was sitting there talking with some guys. And I said, I was kind of scared. It's like, this guy's like God to me, right?
Yeah.
And I walked up to him and I said, man, I'm such a fan. And he stood up, and huge guy, big, looked like he was like 7 feet tall. And I said, man, if you're ever in LA, I teach at a school, and we would love to have you come and talk and give a workshop at our school. And you know what he said? He said, man, I ain't got nothing to show those kids. And I was like, you don't realize that if you played one note, you'd have guys on the floor. You know, we're so respectful of you, and we love you so much, and we love your music, and you know, we'd love to have you there. But unfortunately, he died before he ever came back to LA.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your quote? I'd rather hear BB King drop his guitar than listen to. I'll never forget
a lot of people.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention any names. I was going,
Let's
shut up. I better shut up right there. The quote goes, I'd rather listen to BB King drop his guitar on stage than listen to fill in the blank. And I remember that, and I thought it cracked me up. Anyway,
I also say that about Wayne Shorter. I'd rather hear Wayne Shorter drop his saxophone on the floor than to hear a lot of saxophone players who play millions of notes. I think Wayne Shorter can say more with 2 notes than most sax players can say with 100. But that's just my opinion. I just love Wayne, you know.
Getting back to, you know, jazz, rock, blues, and all of that. What about groups like Weather Report? I know you're a huge fan. I know you played with Joe and all that. You know, I mean, you know, I listened to them live in particular, and, you know, he's got a million freaking keyboards, you know, and you got Jocko playing, you know, that bass tone that he used. And, you know, I mean, that's clearly, to me, that's like a rock setting almost, except for the saxophone. You don't see too many saxophones around. You know, a kind of a rock setting kind of thing, but clearly, you know, I mean, I would have to categorize that band a fusion band, I guess. How do you, you know, where would you look at what they drew from rock to become what they were?
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
You played with Joe, you know.
Sure, and I'll just tell you this one really quick, funny story. We were in, I think it was Switzerland, and we were playing at a club, and we were looking at, as we were going in for the sound check, we saw the poster of all the bands playing there, and it said this band, and after the thing it would say rock, jazz, fusion, blah blah blah, and then after Joe Zawinul's name, it just said Zawinul. And he got a kick out of that, you know. And they were like, yeah, man, you can't categorize me, man. You know, well, I almost hate to say it's fusion because I'm afraid the ghost of Joe will strike me with a lightning bolt or something.
Yeah, that's
yeah. You know, there are 2 types of guys who got into this crazy music we call fusion. You know, there are guys that played jazz first. There are guys that played rock first. I'm clearly a guy that played rock first. had control over my instrument as a rock musician way before I ever heard jazz. So
Right.
I was already getting a tone. I already knew somewhat how to phrase. And, I had a lot of things going for me as a rock guitarist when it comes to just being a musician, like a musician with experience. I played a lot of gigs, a lot of clubs, a lot of experience under my belt before I even heard a note of jazz.
Mm-hmm.
So when I heard jazz and I got interested in it, then just learning the vocabulary was really the easy part, because it's just learning some scales, learning some notes, learning chord tones. And of course, it's all the jazz vocabulary does have its basis in kind of a scholastic thing. You do know you have to know certain things to play jazz. You need to know your intervals, and you need to know your chord tones and which scales go with which chords and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But that's all, left brain stuff that's easy to learn, like going to school, right? It's the experience. That's the hard part. Right. So applying those notes to the tone that I already had made me, I guess, sound more experienced than someone who just picked up a guitar for the first time and is trying to learn jazz. Right. So I'm a rock guitarist that learned how to play jazz later. Now, sometimes when jazz guitar players try to learn rock, that can be a problem because they have the vocabulary, but learning to control an electric guitar on stage and get good tone out of it, that takes years and years and years of experience.
Amen, brother. I want you to say that again, because, a lot of jazz guys, they don't get what's going on in rock. It's so much more than the notes that are being played. It's the control of what the instrument and fitting. Say that again. Talk about that a little bit more.
Well, basically, electric guitar is a beast. It's very unruly. It's not easy to get a good tone from an electric guitar. And most of the electric guitar tones you hear are actually pretty bad. There's only certain few select guys that I can think of, off the top of my head, who really get great tone from electric guitars. And those guys are famous, and everybody already knows who they are, because it's not just their notes that made them famous. It's also their whole concept. For example,
there are people out there that don't know the names. Who would you name? What would be your top
let's
guys?
Start with the guys who started it all, like Jimmy Page. Jimmy Page was already, even before Led Zeppelin, Jimmy Page was a very, very well-known studio player in London, done tons of sessions and had a lot of experience with tone and electric guitar tones before Led Zeppelin even existed.
Right.
So here's a guy who really knows his stuff. He knows how to mic an electric guitar. He knows how to EQ it. He knows how to layer different sounds and different room placements of the microphone to make it sound really good. In other words, he's not just a guitar player, he's a producer, and a really good one. Right. So, when you get somebody like that in a trio setting, Led Zeppelin records are so great, not just because of the great songs and the great playing, but all the production is amazing, especially for back then, where they're working with tape and not many tracks. And they did some magic back then it's just incredible. So I can appreciate that when I hear it, loving production and loving guitar. That's why I love Beyonce so much, because the production thing is so incredibly high. And not only that she's a great singer and I love her voice and she's very talented, but the production and the writing is top notch. So same reason I appreciate Led Zeppelin, because the production, it's amazing. So Jimmy, maybe started that, but Deep Purple wasn't far behind, with Ritchie Blackmore known to have one of the best Strat tones in rock history. And these guys were the guys I was idolizing, and Jeff Beck, and Jimi Hendrix. And these guys were all known as not just for their notes, but in just one phrase, you could tell who was who. I mean, these guys had real voices.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm agreeing with you.
and they were young cats too. And
Mhm.
already at the young age, they already had this amazing voice of their own, personality of their own that you could recognize in one phrase. You could tell that's Richie Blackmore, that's Jeff Beck, that's,
Mhm.
whoever, right? And it's like, wow, this guy already has a voice and a sound that's very, very, independent, his own thing. So that's something that I'm sure it took them years to accomplish, but those years we didn't see. Those years of
Right.
experimentation with amps and tones, we didn't see that part of it because
Mhm.
they were probably playing in unknown bands where they lived and they were developing that. And then when it came out on an album, we hear it and we just think, oh, well, that's just something he did. That's something that probably took them 10 years to do before they ever made a record. That's how long it takes to develop some kind of a voice on the electric guitar and to master the tone and get all that happening and the phrasing and just the control of the instrument, because it's a beast to control it and make it sound good. It's not easy.
No, it's
So,
not.
so the jazz guitar players that are interested in playing rock and just think that they can just buy a Strat and a pedal and plug it into an amp and they think they're going to sound like a rock guy. No, you're not. In your dreams. So,
I